They say love is blind, but arrogance is fatal. In a high-end cafe in downtown Seattle, a woman named Jessica thought she had it all. She was young, beautiful, and on the arm of Marcus Stratford, the city's most powerful CEO. She felt so untouchable that she did the unthinkable. She stood up and slapped Marcus's wife right across the face in public. The cafe went silent. Jessica smirked, thinking she had won, but she didn't notice the grey-haired man sitting 2 tables away, quietly reading a newspaper. She didn't know that she had just committed assault in front of Chief City Judge Arthur Pendleton. And what happened next would destroy 3 lives and save 1. You need to hear this story. The rain in Seattle was relentless that Tuesday, hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Gilded Bean, an exclusive coffeehouse known for its $18 lattes and clientele that owned half the city's skyline. Linda Stratford sat at a corner table, her posture perfect, her hands folded over a leather portfolio. At 34, Linda possessed a timeless elegance that money couldn't buy, though she had plenty of it. She wore a simple charcoal blazer and a silk scarf, a stark contrast to the flashy, logo-heavy attire of the influencers who frequented the spot. She wasn't here for coffee. She was here to end a marriage that had been dead for 3 years. She checked her watch. Marcus was 20 minutes late. Typical. Marcus Stratford, CEO of Stratford Dynamics, used time like a weapon. Making people wait was his way of reminding them who held the power. Linda took a slow sip of her Earl Grey tea, her eyes scanning the room. She saw business deals being struck, affairs being hidden, and laptops displaying stock trends. Then, the heavy oak doors swung open. The atmosphere in the cafe shifted. Marcus walked in, bringing a gust of cold wind and expensive cologne with him. He was handsome in that sharp, predatory way, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than most people's cars. But Linda's stomach didn't drop because of him. It dropped because of who he was holding hands with. Jessica Miller. Linda had seen the photos, of course. The paparazzi made sure of that. Jessica was 22, a former fitness model turned brand ambassador for one of Marcus's subsidiaries. She was undeniably stunning, with platinum blonde hair, porcelain skin, and a figure that she flaunted in a tight red bodycon dress that was entirely inappropriate for a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Marcus spotted Linda and didn't even flinch. He guided Jessica toward the table, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. "You're late, Marcus," Linda said, her voice steady, ignoring the woman clinging to him. "Traffic was a nightmare," Marcus said dismissively, pulling out a chair. He didn't sit in it, though. He held it out for Jessica. Jessica sat down with a flourish, dropping her designer bag onto the table, right on top of Linda's portfolio. "Hi, Linda," Jessica said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Marcus said you wouldn't mind if I tagged along. We have a dinner reservation right after this, so it just made sense." Linda looked at the handbag on her documents, then up at her husband. "I asked to meet you to discuss the settlement, Marcus." Privately. Marcus sat down, signaling a waiter without making eye contact. "Jess knows everything, Linda. We don't have secrets. Besides, I figure having her here will speed this up. You see what you're losing, so maybe you'll stop fighting for shares you don't deserve." The waiter arrived, looking nervous. "Can I get you started?" "Double espresso," Marcus barked, "and a skinny vanilla latte for the lady." "Actually," Jessica interrupted, looking at Linda with a smirk, "make it a celebratory champagne. 2 glasses. We have good news, don't we, babe?" Linda felt a cold chill run down her spine. She looked at Marcus. What is she talking about? Marcus loosened his tie, looking bored. Just say it, Jess. I'm pregnant, Jessica announced, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. She rubbed her flat stomach theatrically. It's a boy. A heir. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. Heir. It was a direct attack. Linda and Marcus had tried for years to have children, resulting in 3 heartbreaking miscarriages. Marcus had called her broken after the last one. Congratulations, Linda said, her voice barely a whisper. She refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of her. So you see, Marcus leaned forward, his eyes cold. I need this divorce finalized yesterday. I need to marry Jess before the baby comes. The press loves a legitimate family. So, sign the papers, Linda. The original offer. The house in the Hamptons and a monthly stipend. Give up your claim to the Stratford Dynamics shares. Linda slowly moved Jessica's bag off her portfolio. She opened the folder. I can't do that, Marcus. My father founded that company. Those shares are my birthright. I'm willing to give you the house, the cars, the accounts, but I keep the board seat and my 40% stake. Jessica laughed. It was a harsh, sharp sound. Oh, honey, you really don't get it, do you? You're the past. I'm the future. Marcus built that company into what it is. You just sat at home arranging flowers. I was the CFO for 6 years, Jessica, Linda corrected calmly. I secured the financing that saved the company from bankruptcy in 2019. Boring, Jessica rolled her eyes, checking her nails. Marcus, make her sign it. I'm tired of looking at her old clothes. Does she even own a mirror? You look like a librarian. Sign it, Linda, Marcus growled. Don't make me destroy you in court. I have lawyers who will make your life a living hell. I'll paint you as unstable. I'll use your therapy records against you. I'll leave you with nothing. Linda took a deep breath. She looked around the cafe. A few people were watching, sensing the tension. In the corner, an older man with white hair and thick-rimmed glasses lowered his newspaper slightly, watching them with intense, dark eyes. No, Linda said firmly. That was the moment the heir left the room. Excuse me, Jessica snapped, her smile vanishing. I said no, Linda repeated, her voice gaining strength. I am filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and I am petitioning for a full audit of the company finances. I know about the offshore accounts in the Caymans, Marcus. I know about Project Hades. Marcus's face went pale. The arrogance drained out of him instantly. You don't know what you're talking about. I do. And I have the documents to prove it. Linda tapped the leather portfolio. Jessica didn't understand the financial implications, but she understood one thing. Linda was winning. Linda was looking down on her. And Jessica, who had spent her whole life fighting to climb the social ladder, snapped. She stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. You shut up, you jealous, barren witch! The cafe went dead silent. The espresso machine stopped hissing. The low murmur of conversations vanished. Sit down, Jessica, Marcus hissed, grabbing her wrist. Not here. No. Jessica yanked her arm away. She loomed over Linda, who remained seated, looking up with a mixture of pity and resolve. You think you're better than me. You're nothing. You're just a placeholder. Marcus hates you. Everyone laughs at you. I pity you, Jessica, Linda said softly. He did it to me. He'll do it to you. That was the trigger. In a blind rage, Jessica swung her arm back. It happened in slow motion for everyone watching, but too fast to stop. Her open palm connected with Linda's cheek with a sickeningly loud crack. The force of the blow knocked Linda's head to the side. Her teacup rattled in its saucer. A collective gasp swept through the room. Linda sat frozen, her hand slowly coming up to touch her stinging cheek. The imprint of Jessica's hand was already turning red against her pale skin. Jessica stood there, chest heaving, her eyes wild. For a second, she looked triumphant. She looked at Marcus, expecting him to defend her, but Marcus looked horrified, not because he cared about Linda's pain, but because he saw the cell phones coming out. "Oh my God," a woman at the next table whispered, holding up her iPhone. "She just slapped her." You hit me," Linda said, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with shock. "And I'll do it again if you don't sign those papers," Jessica screamed, grabbing a glass of water from the table and splashing it into Linda's face. The ice water soaked Linda's silk scarf and blouse. "That is enough!" The voice boomed through the cafe like a thunderclap. It didn't come from the manager. It didn't come from Marcus. It came from the corner table. The older man with the white hair stood up. He wasn't particularly tall, and he wore a modest tweed jacket, but he carried an aura of authority that made the air feel heavy. He folded his newspaper neatly, the Financial Times, and placed it on the table. Marcus looked over, annoyed. "Mind your own business, old man. This is a family matter." The man didn't blink. He walked slowly toward their table, his cane tapping rhythmically against the floor. Tap, tap, tap. "Assault and battery," the man said, his voice gravelly and calm, followed by a second count of battery with the water. "In the state of Washington, that is a gross misdemeanor, punishable by up to 364 days in jail and a $5,000 fine." Jessica laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Who do you think you are? Security? Go back to your crossword puzzle, Grandpa." Marcus stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate the stranger. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but you need to walk away. I'm Marcus Stratford. I own this block. If you don't want to be banned from every establishment in this city, you'll sit down." The old man stopped 3 feet from them. He looked at Jessica, then at Marcus, and finally his eyes softened as he looked at Linda, who was wiping water from her eyes. "Are you all right, madam?" he asked Linda gently. I think so," Linda stammered. "Good." The man turned back to Marcus. A small, dry smile played on his lips. "Mr. Stratford, you may own the block, but I own the gavel that decides whether you sleep in a penthouse or a prison cell." He reached into his tweed jacket pocket. Marcus flinched, thinking it was a weapon, but the man simply pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. A gold badge caught the overhead lights. "I am Chief City Judge Arthur H. Pendleton," he said, his voice ringing with absolute power. "And I believe your mistress just committed a violent crime in my jurisdiction, and you, Mr. Stratford, just attempted to intimidate a witness." Marcus's face went from red to ghost white. Everyone in the legal world knew the name Pendleton. He was the hanging judge of Seattle, the man who had put away the frantic mob boss of the Rossi family 3 years ago, the man who was known for having zero tolerance for the arrogance of the wealthy. And Jessica just looked confused. "Judge? So what? My boyfriend can buy you." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Marcus looked at Jessica with pure terror. She had just tried to bribe Arthur Pendleton. Judge Pendleton let out a short, dark chuckle. He pulled out his phone. "Officer Davies?" He spoke into the phone without breaking eye contact with Marcus. "This is Judge Pendleton. I'm at the Gilded Bean on 4th. I need a patrol car immediately. I have a 1031 in progress. Assault. And bring the corruption unit. We have an attempted bribery of a judicial official." He hung up and looked at Jessica. "Young lady, I suggest you sit down and remain silent. You have already dug your grave. Stop trying to bury yourself in it." The 10 minutes between Judge Pendleton's phone call and the arrival of the Seattle Police Department were the longest of Marcus Stratford's life. In the business world, Marcus was a shark. He ate competitors for breakfast, but in the silence of the Gilded Bean, stripped of his boardrooms and his assistants, he was paralyzed. He watched as customers held up their phones, recording every second. He knew with a sickening certainty that his stock price was dropping with every frame being captured. Jessica, however, was still operating under a delusion of grandeur. She was reapplying her lipstick. "Marcus, stop sweating," she whispered, loud enough for the judge to hear. "It's a misdemeanor. I'll pay the fine. We'll sue this old geezer for harassment later." Judge Pendleton didn't look up from his phone. He was calmly typing a note. "Ms. Miller, I would save your breath. You're going to need it to explain to the booking officer why you assaulted a woman in public." Two uniformed officers entered the cafe, followed closely by a woman in a trench coat. Detective Sarah Miller, no relation, known in the precinct for her no-nonsense attitude toward domestic disputes. "Judge Pendleton," Detective Miller nodded respectfully, ignoring Marcus entirely. "We got the call. What's the situation?" "Simple assault, Detective. Witnessed by myself and 12 other patrons. The victim is Mrs. Stratford there." Pendleton pointed his cane at Linda. "The aggressor is that woman in the red dress. She also attempted to bribe a judicial officer." Detective Miller turned to Jessica. Her face was stone cold. "Ma'am, please stand up and place your hands behind your back." Jessica laughed, expecting Marcus to intervene. She looked at him. "Babe, tell them." Marcus stared at the floor. He was calculating. If he defended her now, he was an accomplice. If he stayed silent, he was a coward. But cowards survived. "Do what they say, Jess," Marcus muttered, his voice hollow. "What?" Jessica shrieked. "You're the CEO of Stratford Dynamics. You don't let cops arrest your future wife." "Ma'am, stand up." Now, Detective Miller stepped forward, her hand resting on her belt. Jessica stood up, but she didn't turn around. She grabbed her handbag and swung it at the detective. It was a weak, flailing motion, but it was enough. "Resisting arrest." The second officer moved in. They spun Jessica around. The sound of the handcuffs ratchet-locking, click, 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 was the definitive end of her high society fantasy. "Ow! You're hurting me! I'm pregnant!" Jessica screamed, thrashing as they marched her toward the door. "Marcus, do something! Marcus!" Marcus didn't move. He didn't look up. He let the mother of his unborn child be dragged out into the rainy Seattle streets, screaming his name, while the cameras flashed. Once the door closed, silence returned to the cafe. Linda stood up, still shivering from the ice water. She picked up her wet portfolio. She looked at her husband, a man she had once loved, a man she had built an empire with. "You didn't even try to stop them," Linda said, her voice filled with a strange mixture of disgust and clarity. She was out of control," Marcus stammered, finally looking up. His eyes were wild. "Linda, you have to tell the judge to drop this. Think of the company. Think of the share price. If this goes to trial—" "Mr. Stratford," Judge Pendleton interrupted, standing up and buttoning his tweed jacket. "The state is pressing charges. It is not up to your wife anymore. And if you attempt to contact her to coerce a withdrawal of testimony, I will have you arrested for obstruction of justice before you can finish your espresso." The judge turned to Linda and offered her a handkerchief from his pocket. It was monogrammed with AHP. "My driver is outside, Mrs. Stratford," the judge said kindly. "May I offer you a lift? I believe you have a statement to give at the precinct, and I wouldn't want you to have to wait in the rain." Linda took the handkerchief. She looked at Marcus one last time. He looked small, defeated. "Thank you, Judge," she said. She walked out of the cafe on the arm of the most powerful man in the city's legal system, leaving Marcus alone with 2 cold coffees and a ruined reputation. King County Jail is not a place for silk dresses. Jessica sat on a metal bench in the holding cell, the smell of bleach and unwashed bodies filling her nose. Her red dress was stained, her hair was a mess, and her mascara had run down her cheeks. She had been stripped of her jewelry, her phone, and her dignity. She kept waiting for the door to open. She kept waiting for Marcus's high-priced lawyers, Vanderbilt and Associates, to stride in with a bail check and a cappuccino. But 3 hours passed, then 5. Across town, in the penthouse office of Stratford Dynamics, the scene was chaotic. Marcus was pacing the length of his office, throwing a glass of scotch against the wall. Shattered glass littered the Persian rug. "How bad is it?" he yelled at his PR manager, a young man named David who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. It's viral, sir," David said, hesitatingly connecting his tablet to the large wall screen. "Someone live-streamed it on TikTok. It has 4 million views in 3 hours. The hashtag #HujoStratfordSlap is trending #1 globally." On the screen, Marcus watched the video. He saw himself sitting there, passive, while Jessica slapped Linda. He saw the judge stand up. He saw the fear in his own eyes. The comments were brutal. "Turn it off!" Marcus roared. The door to his office opened. Silas Thorne walked in. Silas was not a nice man. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you were guilty. He charged $1,500 an hour and had no soul. "Silas, get her out," Marcus pleaded. "Get Jessica out. She's pregnant. If she miscarries in there, the press will eat me alive." Silas sat down calmly and opened his briefcase. "Marcus, sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want my image fixed." "Your image is dead, Marcus," Silas said coldly. "The only thing we can save now is your money and your freedom. I just got off the phone with the district attorney. They are throwing the book at her. Assault, battery, resisting arrest, and bribery of a public official. Judge Pendleton has fast-tracked the arraignment for tomorrow morning." "So? Pay the bail?" "No," Silas said. Marcus froze. "What?" "If you bail her out, you align yourself with her," Silas explained, his voice smooth and reptilian. "The narrative right now is that you are a weak husband, controlled by a crazy mistress. If you help her, you confirm that. But if we spin this..." Silas leaned forward. "If we say that you were also a victim, that she was abusive, that she coerced you, then you become sympathetic. You distance yourself from the crazy woman who slapped the beloved founder's daughter." Marcus blinked. It was ruthless. It was evil. Jessica was carrying his child. She had done exactly what he wanted her to do, intimidate Linda, until it went wrong. "But the baby," Marcus whispered. "We can deal with custody later," Silas shrugged. "Right now you have to choose. Do you want to save your mistress, or do you want to save your CEO position? Because the board is meeting in emergency session tomorrow at noon. If you are linked to her, they will fire you." Marcus looked out the window at the rainy city. He thought about his power. He thought about his money. "She's on her own," Marcus said softly. The Seattle Municipal Court, Department 3, was packed. Reporters lined the benches. Sketch artists were sharpening their pencils, and the gallery was full of curious onlookers. Linda sat in the front row, wearing a modest navy dress. Her cheek was slightly bruised, a visual reminder of the violence. Next to her sat a victim's advocate provided by the state. When the bailiff announced, "All rise," the room stood. Judge Arthur Pendleton walked in, but he wasn't presiding. Since he was a witness, he had recused himself. The presiding judge was the Honorable Sarah Chen, a woman known for being fair but stern. Case number 49204, the City of Seattle versus Jessica Miller, the clerk announced. The side door opened. Jessica was led in. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit. It hung loosely on her frame. She looked around the room frantically, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Marcus. Marcus was sitting 3 rows back, wearing dark sunglasses inside the courtroom. Jessica's face lit up with relief. She smiled at him, a desperate, pleading smile. She thought he was there to save her. "Miss Miller, you are charged with assault in the 4th degree, battery and attempted bribery." Judge Chen read the docket. "How do you plead?" Jessica looked at the empty table next to her. "Where is my lawyer? Marcus, where is Silas?" Marcus stared straight ahead. He didn't move. A young man in an ill-fitting suit stood up from the defense table. "Your Honor, I am Greg Finkel from the Public Defender's Office. I have been assigned to represent Miss Miller." Jessica recoiled as if she had been slapped. "Public Defender? No. My boyfriend is Marcus Stratford. He has lawyers. Silas Thorne represents us," the courtroom murmured. Judge Chen looked over her glasses at the gallery. "Mr. Thorne, are you present?" Silas Thorne stood up from the back of the room, smoothing his suit. "Your Honor, I am present. However, I am here representing Mr. Marcus Stratford as an interested party. I do not and will not represent Ms. Miller." The color drained from Jessica's face. She grabbed the railing of the defendant's box. "Marcus, what is he saying? Tell them," Silas continued, his voice projecting clearly for the reporters. "Furthermore, my client, Mr. Stratford, would like to request a temporary restraining order against Ms. Miller. He fears for his safety, given her violent outburst yesterday." The gasp in the courtroom was audible. Even Linda looked shocked. She turned to look at Marcus, who was still hiding behind his sunglasses. It was the ultimate betrayal. He wasn't just abandoning her. He was burying her to save himself. Jessica made a sound that wasn't quite human, a strangled sob of pure heartbreak and rage. "You liar! You told me to do it! You told me to make a sign! I'm carrying your son!" "Order!" Judge Chen banged her gavel. "Ms. Miller, silence!" "He's lying!" Jessica screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "He has the offshore accounts. He has the Project Hades files. He told me everything. If I go down, Marcus, I am taking you with me." Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted from a domestic drama to something far more serious. Linda sat up straighter. Project Hades. Jessica had mentioned it in the cafe, but saying it on the record in open court changed everything. Judge Chen narrowed her eyes. She looked at the prosecutor. Bail is set at 500,000. Defendant is considered a flight risk. Remand to custody. "No! Marcus!" Jessica screamed as the bailiffs grabbed her arms. She was dragged out, kicking and screaming, her eyes locked on the man who had promised her the world and given her a prison cell. As the doors closed on Jessica, Marcus stood up to leave, thinking he had successfully severed the tie. He turned to exit the courtroom, surrounded by his security. But the path was blocked. Standing in the aisle, leaning on his cane, was Judge Pendleton, the witness. Next to him was a tall, severe-looking man in a grey suit. "Going somewhere, Mr. Stratford?" Pendleton asked pleasantly. "Out of my way, Arthur," Marcus growled. "I'm afraid I can't do that." Pendleton smiled. He gestured to the man beside him. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Special Agent Davison from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." Agent Davison stepped forward, holding a folded piece of paper. "Marcus Stratford, you are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Ms. Miller's outburst in the cafe gave us probable cause to seize her phone. And unlike you, she didn't delete her text history. We have the Project Hades documents." Marcus's sunglasses fell off his face. The press photographers who thought the show was over suddenly started flashing their cameras again. The blinding lights captured the exact moment the CEO realized his wife had won. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Seattle looked more like a movie premiere than a legal proceeding. Vans with satellite dishes lined the streets. Project Hades had become the biggest financial scandal of the decade. Inside, Marcus Stratford sat at the defendant's table. He looked 10 years older. His hair was thinning, and the bespoke Italian suits had been replaced by a modest department store blazer, a suggestion by his legal team to make him look humble. It wasn't working. The prosecutor, a sharp-witted woman named AUSA Reynolds, stood up. The prosecution calls its star witness to the stand, Ms. Jessica Miller. The doors opened. The gallery craned their necks. Jessica walked in. She was visibly pregnant now, waddling slightly in a grey maternity dress. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired, defeated, but her eyes held a burning, cold hatred as she walked past Marcus. She didn't look at him. She looked through him. She took the stand. "Ms. Miller," Reynolds began, "can you tell the court your relationship to the defendant?" "I was his mistress," Jessica said, her voice flat. "And he is the father of my unborn child." "And can you explain what Project Hades was?" Jessica took a deep breath. She looked at the jury. Marcus always hated that he didn't really own Stratford Dynamics. Linda, his wife, owned the controlling interest because her father founded it. Marcus was just an employee with a fancy title. He hated that she had the power. Marcus's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! Hearsay!" "Overruled," the judge said. "Continue." "Project Hades was a plan to bankrupt the company intentionally," Jessica explained. "Marcus set up 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He was transferring the company's most valuable patents, the AI drone technology and the medical imaging software, to these shell companies for pennies. He was selling billion-dollar assets for 100 to companies he secretly owned." The jury gasped. "Why?" Reynolds asked. "Because he wanted the stock price of Stratford Dynamics to crash to 0, Jessica said, a tear sliding down her cheek. "He wanted to make Linda's shares worthless. He wanted to destroy her inheritance. Once the company was bankrupt, he planned to buy the assets back with his new company and become a billionaire on his own, leaving Linda with nothing but debt." "And how do you know this?" "Because he made me the signatory on the Cayman accounts." Jessica pointed a trembling finger at Marcus. "He told me it was a tax loophole for our retirement fund. He used me. He put my name on the crimes, so if he got caught, I would take the fall." Reynolds walked over to the evidence table and picked up a blown-up printout of a text message. "Ms. Miller, please read this text message sent from the defendant's phone to yours on the night of the incident at the cafe." Jessica squinted at the screen. Her voice shook as she read it aloud. "Keep stalling her. Once she signs the divorce papers, trigger the sell-off. By Monday morning, she'll be the queen of nothing. And if she doesn't sign, we make her look crazy. Destroy her." Silence filled the courtroom. It was the smoking gun. It wasn't just fraud. It was a malicious, calculated conspiracy to ruin a woman's life. Marcus put his head in his hands. He knew it was over. Silas Thorne, his expensive lawyer, was already packing up his briefcase, looking at his watch. Even he knew there was no coming back from that. The cross-examination. The air in the federal courtroom was stale, recycled, and thick with tension. The gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder. Jessica Miller sat in the witness box, clutching her baby bump as if it were a shield. She had just laid out the framework of Project Hades, damning Marcus Stratford with every breath. But Silas Thorne, Marcus's lead defense attorney, a man whose suit cost more than the average American's annual mortgage, was not done. He stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. He was known as the Butcher for a reason. He didn't just win cases, he eviscerated witnesses. "Miss Miller," Silas began, his voice smooth like oiled velvet, "you claim that Mr. Stratford orchestrated this entire scheme, that you were merely a puppet, a victim of his manipulation. Is that correct?" "Yes," Jessica whispered, her voice trembling. "He told me what to sign. I didn't understand the documents." Silas walked to the projection screen. He clicked a remote. A photograph appeared. It showed Jessica on a yacht in the Mediterranean, wearing diamond earrings that dragged her earlobes down, laughing with a glass of champagne in hand. This photo was taken 3 days after the first shell company, Hades Holdings Limited, was incorporated in the Cayman Islands. "You look quite happy for a victim, Miss Miller." I didn't know then," she stammered. "Didn't know?" Silas scoffed. He clicked the remote again. A magnified email appeared on the screen. "This is an email from your personal account to a luxury real estate agent in Zurich. Dated November 14th. Subject line, retirement plans. In it you write, make sure the villa is secluded. Once the SD stock crashes, we will be bringing a significant amount of liquid cash over." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Linda, sitting in the front row, remained statue still, though her knuckles were white as she gripped her purse. Silas turned to the jury, his eyes gleaming. "Once the stock crashes." "Those are your words, Miss Miller, not Marcus's. You weren't a puppet. You were a partner. You were the one pushing for the timeline to be accelerated because you wanted that villa in Zurich. You weren't afraid of Marcus Stratford. You were greedy." "No," Jessica sobbed, looking frantically at the jury. "He made me write it. He dictated it." And yet, Silas leaned in over the witness railing, invading her space. "You were the one who slapped Mrs. Stratford in the cafe. You were the one who initiated violence. Tell me, Ms. Miller, is it possible that you are testifying against Mr. Stratford today, not because you want justice, but because he refused to leave his wife for you? Is this revenge?" "He promised me," Jessica screamed, cracking under the pressure. "He promised me the world. He said Linda was a boring, barren waste of space, and that I was his queen." The silence that followed was absolute. Silas smiled. He had what he wanted. He had painted Jessica as unstable and vindictive. "No further questions, Your Honor." The surprise witness. The prosecution looked shaken. Jessica's credibility was tattered. Marcus sat at the defense table, a smug grin slowly spreading across his face. He thought he had won. He thought Silas had saved him. But AUSA Reynolds stood up, her face grim. The prosecution calls its final witness, Linda Stratford. Marcus's grin vanished. Linda took the stand. She didn't look like the victim anymore. She wore a white suit, sharp and immaculate. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. "Mrs. Stratford," Reynolds asked gently, "when did you first suspect your husband was defrauding the company?" Linda adjusted the microphone. Her voice was clear, ringing like a bell through the silent room. "I didn't suspect. I knew. For 2 years." The jury looked confused. Even Marcus looked shocked. "Explain," Reynolds said. "My father built Stratford Dynamics on transparency," Linda said, looking directly at Marcus. "When I stepped down as CFO to focus on our attempts to start a family, I kept my access codes. I monitored the servers. I saw the data packets being rerouted to the Caymans." "Why didn't you stop him sooner?" "Because I needed the full picture," Linda said. "If I had acted too early, Marcus would have claimed it was a clerical error. He would have fired a few accountants and kept his job. I needed him to complete the transaction. I needed him to sign the transfer of the AI patents. I watched him steal from my family for 24 months, waiting for him to cross the line of no return. She reached into her blazer and pulled out a small encrypted USB drive. This, Linda held it up, is the digital key to the server known as Tartarus. It's the hidden backup server Marcus installed in the basement of our vacation home. He thought it was offline. It wasn't. It recorded every keystroke he made. It recorded him logging into the Cayman accounts. It recorded him searching for non-extradition countries. She turned her gaze to Marcus. It wasn't anger in her eyes. It was pity. You thought I was just a housewife arranging flowers, Marcus. You forgot that I taught you how to read a balance sheet. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Silas Thorne stopped packing his briefcase. He slumped in his chair. The Tartarus drive was the nail in the coffin. Jessica's testimony was hearsay. Linda's drive was hard, mathematical proof. The verdict. The jury deliberated for 3 days. The wait was agonizing. The press camped outside, speculating on the fall of the tech king and his Insta-model Mistress. On the 4th morning, the sky was a bruised purple over Seattle. The courtroom was sealed. "Will the defendant please rise?" Judge Chen commanded. Marcus stood up. His legs were shaking so badly he had to lean on the table. Jessica stood a few feet away, weeping silently. On count 1, conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Guilty. Marcus flinched as if he'd been punched. On count 2, wire fraud. Guilty. On count 3, money laundering. Guilty. The word rang out, again and again. 24 counts, 24 guilties. The judge removed her glasses. She looked at Marcus with profound disdain. "Mr. Stratford," she said, her voice echoing, "you were given a life most people only dream of. You had wealth, influence, and a partner who supported you. Instead of gratitude, you chose greed. You chose to dismantle a legacy you didn't build purely to satisfy your own ego. You are not a businessman. You are a vandal." She turned to Jessica. "And you, Ms. Miller. You thought you could bypass the rules of society because you were beautiful. You participated in the destruction of a family and a company. Your pregnancy is the only reason you are not going to a maximum security facility." The sentencing. Marcus Stratford, I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for at least 20 years. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $450 million. Jessica Miller, I sentence you to 4 years in federal prison. Upon the birth of your child, custody will be transferred to the state, as you have no fit family members to take guardianship. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. "No!" Jessica screamed, collapsing into the arms of the bailiffs. "My baby! You can't take my baby! Marcus, do something!" Marcus didn't move. The marshals grabbed his arms. He looked back at Linda one last time. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to beg, perhaps to apologize. But Linda simply stood up, turned her back, and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back. The door closed, shutting out his screams. The boardroom purge. 2 weeks later, the rain was lashing against the windows of the Stratford Dynamics skyscraper. But inside, the atmosphere was electric. Linda walked into the boardroom. The room was full of men, the old guard. These were the board members who had looked the other way, while Marcus raided the coffers, the ones who had laughed at Linda's quaint ideas in the past. They all stood up as she entered, but their smiles were nervous. "Sit," Linda commanded. She didn't sit. She paced the length of the table. "Gentlemen," she began, "for 3 years you watched my husband bleed this company dry. You took your bonuses. You enjoyed your company retreats. You thought that as long as the stock price held, nothing mattered. Now, Linda, a balding man named Mr. Henderson stammered. We didn't know the extent. You didn't look. Linda slammed a file onto the table. Negligence is the same as complicity. I have reviewed the bylaws of this corporation. As the majority shareholder, holding the reclaimed 51% stake, I am exercising my right to restructure. She pointed to the door. Mr. Henderson, Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Vance, you are fired, effective immediately. Security is waiting to escort you out. Your severance packages have been denied due to gross breach of fiduciary duty. You can't do this, Henderson sputtered, his face turning purple. We built this place. My father built this place, Linda said, her voice like ice. You just infested it. Get out. They left, grumbling and defeated. The remaining board members, younger, more innovative and terrified, looked at Linda with newfound respect. Now, Linda sat at the head of the table. Let's get to work. We have a reputation to rebuild. I want a full rebrand, and I want Project Hades reversed. The drone technology stays here. It will be used for search and rescue, not sold off for parts. The secret nursery. 6 months passed. The scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by the news of Stratford Dynamics' miraculous turnaround under its new female CEO. But Linda had a secret. Every month, on the 3rd Tuesday, she drove her modest sedan to a quiet suburb outside of Seattle. She pulled up to a large, warm house with a sign out front, St. Jude's Home for Children. She walked inside, where a nun, Sister Margaret, greeted her. He's in the nursery, Linda. Sister Margaret smiled. Linda walked into the room, painted in soft yellows and blues. In a crib near the window lay a baby boy, 6 months old. He had blonde fuzz for hair, Jessica's hair, but he had the dark, intense eyes of Marcus. His name was Leo. Linda reached down and picked him up. The baby cooed, grabbing her finger with his tiny fist. Technically, Leo was a ward of the state. Jessica was in prison. Marcus was in a Supermax facility in Colorado. The baby had no one. When the state had prepared to send Leo to an overcrowded foster system, Linda had intervened. She couldn't adopt him. The psychological scars were too fresh, and the press would have a field day if the victim raised the mistress's child. It would be too confusing for the boy. But she could ensure he was safe. Linda had set up a blind trust, the Phoenix Trust. It paid for Leo's private care at St. Jude's. It would pay for the best boarding schools. It would pay for his university. He would never know poverty. He looks like him, Linda whispered, rocking the baby. Does it hurt? Sister Margaret asked gently, standing in the doorway. To hold him? Sometimes, Linda admitted. When I look at him, I see the betrayal. I see the woman who slapped me. I see the man who told me I was broken because I couldn't give him this. She kissed the baby's forehead. But then I remember, he's innocent. He didn't ask to be born into this mess. If I leave him to the system, the cycle of hate continues. Marcus was a monster because his father was a monster. I have to break the wheel. She placed the sleeping baby back in the crib. She tucked a small teddy bear next to him. Goodbye, Leo, she whispered. I'll be watching over you. The final encounter. 1 year after the slap. Linda sat at the same corner table in the Gilded Bean. The staff treated her like royalty now, not because she demanded it, but because she had saved the company that employed half the city. The bell above the door chimed. Judge Arthur Pendleton walked in. He was retired now, wearing a fisherman's sweater instead of his tweed jacket. He spotted Linda and smiled, limping over. Mind if I join you, Madam CEO? Please, Arthur. Linda gestured to the chair. I ordered you a scone. Blueberry. The judge sat down, looking delighted. You remembered. I remember everything. Linda smiled. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the rain streak the windows of Seattle. I visited the prison yesterday, the judge said quietly. I had to sign some final paperwork for the state regarding the trial records. Linda stiffened slightly. How is he? Marcus. He's diminished, the judge said, buttering his scone. He spends his days in the law library, trying to find a loophole for an appeal. He still thinks he's the smartest man in the room. He doesn't realize the room has locked him out. And her? Linda asked. Jessica. She's having a harder time. Reality is a harsh teacher. But she's taking GED classes. Maybe there is hope for her yet. The judge looked at Linda. His dark, intelligent eyes seemed to pierce right through her. You know, Linda, in 40 years on the bench, I saw thousands of cases. People fighting over money, over pride, over petty insults. Most people let the anger eat them alive. They win the lawsuit, but they lose their souls. He took a sip of coffee. But you did something rare. You didn't just win. You transcended. You didn't let them turn you into a bitter woman. You kept your grace. Linda looked at the reflection in the window. She saw a woman who had been slapped, humiliated, and cheated on. But she also saw a woman who was strong. I realized something, Arthur, she said softly. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's living so well and so kindly that their existence becomes irrelevant. The judge raised his coffee cup in a toast. To living well, he said. To justice, Linda replied, clinking her cup against his. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The clouds parted, and a ray of brilliant sunlight hit the pavement, illuminating the busy street. Linda gathered her things, put on her coat, and walked out of the cafe. She had a board meeting to lead. She had a company to run. And she had a future that was entirely, wonderfully, her own. As we close the file on the Stratford case, we are left with a chilling reminder of how quickly a life can unravel. It is terrifying to think that an entire empire, billions of dollars, decades of legacy, and 3 human lives was dismantled in the span of 30 seconds inside a coffee shop. Marcus Stratford and Jessica Miller walked into the Gilded Bean that rainy Tuesday, believing they were the gods of Seattle. They were armed with youth, beauty, and the arrogance of untouchable wealth. They believed that the rules of decency didn't apply to them, that they could humiliate a woman like Linda in public and simply walk away because they had the money to clean up the mess. They looked at the gray-haired man in the corner and saw a nobody. They didn't realize they were staring into the eyes of their own reckoning. It serves as a brutal lesson in humility. Marcus spent his life building a fortress of lies, hiding assets in the Caymans and treating people like disposable chess pieces. He thought he was playing 4D chess, but he failed to see the board right in front of him. He underestimated the 2 things that eventually destroyed him: the integrity of the law represented by Judge Pendleton and the quiet, resilient intelligence of the wife he deemed boring. Linda's journey is perhaps the most powerful part of this story. In a world that loves loud revenge, screaming matches, drink-throwing, and social media wars, Linda chose the path of silence. She didn't fight back in the cafe. She didn't scream at the press. She waited. She gathered her evidence. She let her enemies make the mistakes, while she held the keys to the kingdom. Her victory wasn't just about getting the money or the company back. It was about reclaiming her dignity. And her final act, the creation of the trust fund for baby Leo, proves that she is truly a leader. It would have been so easy for her to hate that child. That baby is the living proof of her husband's betrayal and his mistress's ambition. But Linda realized that hate is a poison that you drink yourself, hoping the other person dies. By choosing to protect the innocent child, she broke the cycle of toxicity that Marcus had started. She proved that you can be strong without being cruel. Marcus Stratford sits in a cell today, not because he was unlucky, but because he was proud. He sits there knowing that his son is being raised on his ex-wife's charity, a final, stinging irony that likely hurts more than the prison bars. Now, I want to turn this over to you, the listeners. This story raises so many difficult questions about justice, forgiveness, and karma. I want to know what you would have done in Linda's shoes. Be honest. If the person who destroyed your marriage and slapped you in public had a child who ended up in the foster system, would you have stepped in to help? Or would you have walked away and said, "Not my problem"? Is Linda a saint, or is she too forgiving? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, and you want to see more real-life inspired dramas about the secrets of the rich and powerful, please destroy that like button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm show this video to more people. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have a new story dropping next week involving a lottery winner, a greedy stepmother, and a DNA test that changed everything. You do not want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe. Treat people with kindness, because you never know who is watching from the corner table. And I'll see you in the next video.